Welcome back to Natty19's Behind the Screen. This is Charlie, a.k.a. Chuck, a.k.a. Quincy Fellow. Joining me tonight is Jonathan, our benevolent dungeon master.
Greetings.
And Christy Lee, who plays Irame.
Hello.
We're going to cover episodes 8 and 9, talk a little bit about what happened. Let's just jump right into it.
Yes.
So episode 8, this is right after the Assassin Vine fight. So we're all kind of on edge a little bit. The storm's coming. Some people are beat up, maybe a little bit more than others. But we've got to get this shelter built to protect us from the storm. While we're building the shelter, Copernicus, I think we already talked maybe a little bit about Copernicus being upset that we actually stopped for the storm instead of pushing through it. Did we talk about that for episode 7?
We did.
But it carries into episode 8.
It does, because Zimwabi asks Irame when they're maybe down at the canoes doing something or something of the sort.
They were working on the shelter, and that was when Zimwabi and Copernicus had a little bit of a moment, you know?
Yeah.
Where Zimwabi kind of called him out on the attitude.
Right, and Copernicus doesn't care. He's just like, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
He has such a great voice for his character for being angry.
He does.
I want to see more angry Copernicus.
Well, I'm sure we will.
When Zimwabi asks Irame, she just says he's old and cranky. I don't know.
He's just old and cranky. Zimwabi's response was good too.
Yeah.
You have a way with, what did he say?
You have a way with your words.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're getting ready. We're getting the shelter built. We're preparing for the storm. And Irame thanks Quincy for healing her. And I think, like, playing Quincy, I was completely thrown off by another player just thanking me, like another character, like thank you for the heals. Like, it's something that, like, the years and years and years of playing Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, every role playing game I've ever played, online, like video games, tabletop, it doesn't matter. Like, nobody's like ever really, like, maybe it, like, the casual on video games, like, oh, thanks for the heal, you know, but in a role playing game, like, in such a sincere way, in character, like, thanking just took me by surprise.
There were so many times, I think, already, like, that somebody would have been dead if it wasn't for Quincy.
Yeah, it's hard it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
But definitely those heals.
In what would Copernicus in the square, that got pretty nasty for him. Irame with the crocodiles, there was a time where that got pretty scary, you know, so. And
Zavril with the assassin vine. He was running away.
And then Irame with the assassin vine, you know, so it was like.
Well, it's tough being, like, you know, being a bard, having a bard as a healer. Mm-hmm. Like, that's another, that could be a whole nother topic, right? Like, we don't have a cleric, we don't have a dedicated healer.
Yep.
I knew, like, building Quincy, that Cure Light Wounds was probably a must. I mean, I put a lot of other spells into his more academic pursuits.
Yep.
So he doesn't have a ton of combat spells, but.
Well, that's the thing about the combat spells is what I noticed that as a character, not as a player, but as a character, Quincy was seeing that he wasn't hitting much. He wasn't doing damage, you know? And I think
right
that Irame would want to pat him on the back for what he did do.
And Irame does seem like she seems like the kind of character that is very supportive of the other character. Like, she's empathetic, she's kind, you know. I'm thinking of that hug scene with Zimwabi in an earlier episode. Yeah, so that was, and I think it just kind of embarrassed Quincy a little bit. Caught me off guard and embarrassed Quincy. But we get the shelter built, the rain comes down, and we're hanging out in the in the shelter. and Jay really wants us so bad to craft something.
Yeah.
It was funny because everybody was like, "Oh, I can't focus because of this rain."
Yeah.
And you wanted so bad for us to craft something.
I don't know if I want it so bad. You know what it is we talk about it a lot here and there, crafting in general in D&D or other tabletop games, and how, it kind of happens passively. And I feel that these are the moments, because we always end those discussions with, well, I guess, at night when you're camping, traveling, you can kind of keep chipping away at something. And we're always like, that's a good idea. You know what I mean? So whenever that opportunity comes up, I just want to make it apparent that that's an option, So that's all. I don't really care. I don't want to say I don't really care, but because I do think that having a craft can add a lot to the story, add a lot to the game. So
No, I agree with you. It just seemed funny that at that particular moment, like because of the rain or whatever, like the cramped quarters, Copernicus said he couldn't focus on his crafts. Everybody else was worried about their pen and ink.
Right. It did seem, I was picking up like a little bit of a Daria vibe from everybody. That's when I was like, Zimwa B's concentrating just fine.
Oh yeah, I was
you guys.
Yeah, you even had Zimwa B leading us.
I was like, Zimwa B's crafting just fine. Fuck y'all.
So what was he crafting? He had a bolt of cloth.
Yeah.
Is he a tailor?
Yeah, he is a bit of. I wouldn't call not in a traditional sense, but I like to think that tribesmen or tribal folk all have something, all have some sort of a trade of sorts. Maybe
right.
Not in a sense where they have a shop and stuff like that. And maybe it's just something because you see him in Nyanzaro, he clearly doesn't have. He's not a tradesman, but at the same time, maybe when he's out there on the road, so to speak, on the trail, some of those old habits come in. And yeah, he actually is working on something, which you guys will find out hopefully later on down the road here.
Yeah, I mean, if...
Hope it's a ghillie mantle.
I imagine spending a lot of time as a guide, spending a lot of time in the jungle and at campsites. You need to find something to do.
Yeah, exactly. When you think about it, but put yourself in that situation on the trail, or on an expedition in the jungle. Yeah, you have your tasks that you get done, but other than that, especially in a situation where you guys actually cut the day short,
right?
You have that extended night. It's got to be quite boring. After you get all those tasks completed, you're just what are you gonna do?
Absolutely. And even on a regular night, like once you try to get most of your tasks done in the daylight. Once the sun goes down, you've got some time before going to bed, especially depending on, like, some places get more darkness or more light than others.
Right.
But yeah, I think, so it seems Copernicus has a more tangible craft than the rest of us. Most of the rest of us we're academics.
Yeah, so we're journaling and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Or writing letters and drawing maps, that kind of thing. But Copernicus, he takes pieces of every creature that we fight. Seems to be brewing up something special,
Yeah.
from all of these things.
On a side note, I knew a girl in college who used to collect roadkill, and she'd bury it in her yard and let it decompose and then, like, dig it up so she'd have the skeletons and the bones and the skull and like that.
That sounds interesting. I mean,
But, like, like an odd thing to do, and whenever Copernicus does something like that, I think of that girl from college who used to bury roadkill in her yard.
I mean, I bet she gets all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, she gets awesome stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're all hanging out in the tent. We're talking, we're crafting. As the storm dies down, we have conversations. We have a couple conversations in the tent. And one of the conversations is with Zimwa B about danger in the jungle, like what dangers we could face.
Yeah.
And he pretty much says, like, he felt remiss in letting us go like from camp without any guidance, without him with us. He just let us walk around, and he felt that was a mistake.
I think at that point he felt responsible. Excuse me. He wasn't going to take any more chances at that point.
Right.
So, and then when Quincy asked, not everything is in the jungle is out to kill them, at that point he was like, at this point, may as well treat everything as if it's going to kill you,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's definitely taking responsibility there. But when he talks about that, Zavril, and I thought this was interesting on Kway's part, he just says he pretends like he didn't hear. He's not hearing this conversation.
Yeah, I took that as like he was like in an embarrassing kind of way.
Oh, absolutely. That's it. Yeah. But I think like if it was me and if it was Quincy, I might have just said something like, oh, Quincy feels embarrassed. But I thought that was a good touch for Kevin Kway to mention like that Zavril's like he's playing it out rather than just saying
right.
that Zavril's embarrassed. And I thought it was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Also, the dinosaur, that was a fucking awesome touch. Like bringing the recorded, you played a lot of our sound effects for the listeners. If you're not aware, a lot of our sound effects happen in post-processing, but these dinosaur growls, Jay brought these recordings into the session so that we could hear them while we're playing in real time.
Oh, yeah. There's no way I could imitate that and get the same
reaction.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just not. I knew that I wouldn't be able to do it. So
it was awesome because it like we're all looking at each other, and I think Airmay was she said something, Copernicus said something.
Yeah,
it put us on. It created tension.
Yeah, I figured if there's ever a time to do that, because I don't want to do it too much. But if there's ever a situation to do that, I felt that would have been the time to do it. I mean, if you look at the situation, sitting in our recording room, and then if you look at the in-game aspect where you guys are all sitting in that shelter, you can hear it, but you're not going to see it. So there's kind of like that same exact situation. You guys could hear this, you couldn't see it, and just like your characters could hear it and couldn't see it. So I felt it was just that perfect situation to do something like that.
Oh, and I thought it was great that like we're doing a group stealth check to make sure that whatever it is doesn't eat us. It's not aware that we're in there. It's not going to eat us. Mm-hmm. And I think as a group, as a play group, we weren't quite sure how the group stealth checks work. You knew, but the rest of us didn't. So we're all rolling, and some people are rolling low.
Yeah, even as a group check, it was just barely. I think it was actually you guys hit the DC or something. I know it was. I can't remember exactly, but I know it was close.
And I think that was a nice tense moment. Quincy was certain that Zavril and Airmay were going to get us killed, and he said as much.
I guess I'll touch further on that whole scene and why I even played it out the way I did. That was, I think, so far the only encounter that we've had so far that wasn't a random encounter. That was a premeditated encounter. I planned it out, and that was a situation to where I had chase mechanics all planned out for if you guys didn't pass or if somebody went out there. Copernicus came close.
So are you suggesting that it was powerful enough that we couldn't just stand our ground? We would figure out. I decided before we even started that every now and then I'm going to throw an encounter in there that's going to be life-threatening. And based on you guys' decisions, it's going to play out. And the way it was close in my head how that was going to play out, but I almost anticipated somebody doing something, either failing a check or doing something stupid, and then
either dying or coming close. And I knew that the rest of the group, given the chase mechanics, I won't go into them quite yet. I'll probably wait until we actually have a chase in an episode. But
Right.
given the chase mechanics, you guys would have gotten away. There's a whole lot of things going on there with the rain, the jungle, the night. It was dark. You guys could have gotten away, but somebody would have had to. Somebody wouldn't have. Yeah, somebody would have either got really messed up and then got away, or somebody, if they survived that initial attack, then they probably could have got away as well. But
I think it's important actually to have encounters that are beyond your player's capabilities every now and then.
yeah,
Because if it's always something that your players can tackle, everybody strives for like the encounter that's tough, that's hard to beat, but ultimately beatable.
Right.
And that's important. That definitely is very important to the game. But I think it's equally important to remind the players that they're not everything that they're going to confront is defeatable or surmountable by the players. There's always we've got to come back at a later time, or we've got to, just let this one go. Our lives are more important than whatever we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we actually, and I thought of this too, and I think we've even talked about it a few times. Just when you're playing D&D or Pathfinder or any other tabletop game, you get in these situations, and it almost happens subliminally, where the players are going through this adventure, and every encounter they come across, they know that it was meant for them at their level. I know you just touched on that. But also, we almost start thinking of it like a video game, But then you have those, even in the video game world, the games that really set themselves apart from the others would be like games like Dark Souls or whatever, where you find yourself just through exploration in an area that you're not meant to be in, but they don't tell you that, you know what I mean? So you have to learn from experience, you have to trial by fire. And I would love to see more of that come into the tabletop, come back into it.
Yeah, I agree. It ups the stakes, really. Mm-hmm. But we survive. We managed to stay hidden, and it runs off. And I love that. Like even after it left, like we could hear it, like get another creature.
That's where I was going with that. Is this thing is big, and even though it's gone, it's still there.
That was a great moment in episode 8. But I think what happens the next day, so that happens, and then we spend the night in the jungle, and the next day we're back on the river, and we see these humanoid figures, and it looks like they're doing something, looks like they're huddled around something. And I think all of us kind of like had this suspicion, but you played it really well to where I don't know if any of us were 100% certain, at least not right at first.
That they were undead?
That they were undead, that they were zombies. Like, I think all of us were like, well, that seems like it could be zombies or undead sort of digging in something. But it could also be, it could be some tribes people or something, like cleaning an animal that they caught, or
right, yeah, cleaning dishes in the
yeah,
river,
who knows? Doing some kind of chore or task.
I didn't want to give it away right away, and I knew you guys would get it because everybody knows about zombies, you know what I mean? So to be fair, I was trying extremely hard to, I knew it was inevitable, but I was trying hard to just kind of prolong the reveal that they were undead. so a lot of effort went into that.
And we keep probing, we keep asking questions.
And I just kept diverting. Do they look like undead at all? No.
And then even when we smell the rotting flesh, I'm still thinking, okay, it's probably undead, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is. It could have been like an animal that they caught that they're cleaning or doing something with. And so Quincy decides to call out to them anyway. And at this point, I think Quincy was about maybe 70 or 80% certain that maybe they were undead. But at the same time, in case they weren't, and that they had any information or that they needed help, I think he wanted to check. And also, like, the fact that it was just a handful of them, and they're on the shore and we're in a canoe, it seemed like the risk, like they weren't, it wasn't too dangerous, even if they were. Like, we could just paddle away.
Yep.
Yep.
You know, so he calls out to them. And Jeremy, Christy specifically, she's like, why?
That was another one of those moments where we don't know, nobody knew where Jeremy went, and Christy was now in the boat. It's another one of those.
I was there with my glass of wine.
Yeah. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, Jeremy's not there anymore. This is Christy talking with my wine, and you guys are calling out to zombies. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I thought that was a neat moment because Irme was immediately thrown off by them. She was like, no, like, and
Well, she's a trained anthropologist.
yeah, she was like, that is not normal live person behavior. And she, I thought the role reversal was neat because Quincy's kind of usually more standoffish, and Irme is immediately like, let's make friends, you know, let's meet people. But she was like, no, in the entire time too. Like, she didn't quit making comments. She didn't stop being like, no, and shaking her head. And Irme was waiting for Zavril, like, to be like, fuck those people. Like, or Copernicus, you know, we don't have time for this, you know, like, anything.
I think that is interesting. Now that you bring it to the forefront, that role reversal and how it happened immediately in a situation where it was undead, and you know, undead by its own is the opposite of the living. You know, so it's
Right.
Of course, that role reversal would happen. You know, of course.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it did.
I think there was a little bit of irony there because earlier in the very same episode, Quincy is talking about how Irme and Zavril is going to get us killed.
Yeah, that is true.
And then he turns around and it's like, ho there, to a few zombies, which, like, even conceding that they might be zombies. Like,
How threatening is 3 zombies?
right, on the shore while we're in a boat. But then we see more and more come out. And Copernicus tries to charm them.
That was just.
Or does charm
I'm
them.
just going to this right now because I wanted to touch on that. So I'm going to bring this up.
Yeah, and first of all, I didn't even know he could charm anything. I didn't know he was charming.
It's a rustic sort of.
But yeah, and I mean, like, I think conventionally the idea of charming undead is just so unusual. But I looked, and I couldn't find anything in 5e to contradict that he could.
Well, you can charm animals, right?
Traditionally across all platforms, unless this is some sort of Mandela effect thing going on, you can't charm fucking undead or, you know, zombies or anything like that.
Right. They have. Why would you be able to? They're mind effects.
Right. But I mean, as soon as I looked at it, it was funny, and I'm glad I did too. Instead of just assuming, you know. But I was like, you know what, fuck, I'm gonna look. And yeah, where it says condition immunities, it's immune to poisoned. That's it. You know, it's not immune to charm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started looking at different forums and stuff, and I don't remember who the commenter was or which forum I was reading. It was probably a Reddit thread. But somebody pointed out that it could be akin to, like, the simple fact that the undead are animated through magic, and that charm is a magical effect, that it could override that it could have an impact.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily always have to be a mental effect as we think traditionally about it.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, apparently, I mean, it was definitely a learning experience for me.
Yeah, and I'm still not quite sure I've resolved it internally myself. You know, I'm just used to it.
Yeah, and that could
Not
just be
working.
what it is. Yeah, I mean, it's the way we all grew up. You can't charm undead.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to learn that you could the whole time, but for some reason we just always play
Always
that way.
assumed. Yeah, that would be great.
That would totally be a Mandela effect. But it's the zombies, I think, that it's encountering these zombies, not just the handful, but eventually, like, we see a zombie horde. We actually describe it as a horde. I think that changes. This is a pivot point for our entire adventure so far.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no longer are we just people on an expedition out in the jungle trying to, do some really dangerous but yet mundane tasks of, like, rescuing somebody from cannibals, rescuing a group of people from cannibals so that we could secure travel documents, essentially. So now there's something completely different happening.
Absolutely. Now you're, I think for the first time since you left Nyanzaru, you're coming across an actual situation that's happening in Chult. I want to initially say Chult politics, because it kind of is, but at the same time,
Interesting.
yeah, it's almost like a clear cut. On the map of Chult, you have these regions that are swarming with undead. I think they call them undead regions. And right where you guys were on the Sasha and Star River, you're right on that line at this point. And I battled with myself a little bit on how I can really portray that and tie it in with the Zinti, how I can tie that in and make it connected. I know Copernicus at one point was trying to connect the dots, make the assumption that maybe the undead are the Zinti, and Zimwabi's simple-minded people just assumed that they were cannibals.
Yeah, so like...
Which would have been cool.
Yeah.
You see where he's going with that. It would have been cool, but it would have been far too easy, I think.
Yeah. See, and I had similar thoughts that not that the Zinti were always undead, but that something tragic or drastic could have happened to turn the Zinti that wiped them out and reanimated them. Mm-hmm. But we learned that there's a variety of
undead. Yeah,
some of them have armor. They're obviously not all people from the jungle.
Yeah, that whole scenario, there was a lot going on there, and I feel that the zombie horde took it. Obviously, I didn't expect it to go any other way, but I still wanted those details to be in there about the wreckage, the flotsam and jetsam, if you will, along the river, and that is kind of playing into the zombie horde and kind of laying down some groundwork for later on, I guess, or maybe to give some sort of a little bit more of a grounded explanation of the undead, even if it's not all too clear right now.
I mentioned it in the show, and I want to mention it again, even if you can't share anything. But this idea that we're in a place with a death curse, where there's no resurrection, there's still reanimation, there's still undead. Mm-hmm. I haven't quite wrapped my head around that and how those two things could exist simultaneously.
I'm trying to think of what I could get away with saying. It's a small section, but there is a section in the Tomb of Annihilation book that I think it is like undead in Chult, something like that, and it does have an explanation of how that works and why.
So the writers actually considered that.
It is, yeah. It is taken into consideration, and it does work. Yeah, that I think that's all I want to say on it. I could probably get away with saying more because I think even like all the Tomb of Annihilation promotions probably go into more details, but I think you guys, even if you did stumble upon those at some point, had probably forgot most of it anyway.
Yeah, I've deliberately tried to not look too deeply at anything related. I know Quincy's curiosity is piqued. Like, he's wondering how could we, like, why we have both the death curse and they're still reanimated dead.
That could be a good thread to chase down once Quincy gets back to Nyanzaru, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's definitely interested in chasing that. But yeah, so then with these zombies, we are introduced to a chase mechanic. Would this be a similar chase mechanic to what you had in mind for the dinosaurs?
Yeah, this was actually it's funny you say that. because this is actually a little bit of a hybrid system that I made, and I used I didn't know. I guess not. It is a little bit of a. It's like a. God, I don't even know what the right term would be, but I did build it off of. There's similar mechanics to the dinosaur races that they give in the book,
which we haven't experienced.
Which you haven't experienced yet. No. And essentially, in a nutshell, it's all about your speed. And in this case specifically, it was like your speed was everything. How the distance that you were going. I wasn't being all too critical on it. I think the important thing that I wanted in there was you're either moving or you're not moving. And the longer you weren't moving, the more dangerous the situation would have gotten, to where hopefully one of you guys would have got pulled into the water or something like that. And that would have been, that was another situation, not all too different than the dinosaur. Oh,
I could easily see somebody ending up dying as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was a little less reliant on luck than the dinosaur. I think you guys played the luck route with the zombies, but I think you guys could have, especially the casters, I think you guys had a lot more tricks up your sleeve. The casters were being very conservative with their magic. I think they could have done some things to really, make that an easy, stress-free situation, looking over your character sheets. But no, I mean, for the most part, I think it played out well. I think you were smart to do it that way, to conserve your magic, because you don't know what's coming. You guys are at this point almost at the skirmish site where the Zinti had waylaid Zimwabi's original party. I think Arame even said it, to waste spells on zombies when we don't know what we're walking into here.
Right.
Right. That's been the age-old, situation in D&D with casters.
I've been playing this roguelike game on my tablet, and I was so mad the other night because there's permadeath, like a lot of roguelikes, and I had like 11 healing potions, and I was pushing it. I had like a little sliver of health left, and I even said to myself, my next turn, I'm gonna quaff a fucking potion, and of course the thing hits me and kills me. I died with 11 healing potions in my inventory.
Yeah.
So it's like managing spells, managing consumables.
Absolutely.
Like, we want to hold on to them as players.
And you never know. I try not to go too crazy. I used to be real crazy about it, playing a caster. I would do everything I can to conserve my magic for the boss. But nowadays, I'm still conservative to an extent, but I'll throw something out if I feel the situation calls for it.
Right. And maybe even just saving just a couple spell slots, 1 or 2 for the boss.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if you're going to run into the boss. I mean, we all expect as we're playing, there's going to be a boss around the corner.
Yeah, you have some level of control.
But sometimes, maybe those boss fights are the perfect opportunity to improvise and come up with something different.
Right, yeah.
Leverage other strengths. If you don't get to the boss, then you don't get to the boss.
That's right.
So we're being chased by these zombies. They're trying to climb into our boat. We're cutting hands off, kicking them off, making our way up the river. And we get to a point where Zimwabi identifies the markers that he's looking for to identify this is his village or the Zinti territory.
Zimwabi wasn't looking for the markers. When he saw them, he recognized them as the Zinti territory markers.
Okay. Now, as a player, and maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention, but I was slightly confused. Were the markers moved, or did we travel further up the river than we thought because we were running from the zombies?
I think Quincy and everybody else would have been confused by that same thing. So I'm completely happy with that. I think, though, I think it was explained, though. I think Zimwabi did, or at least to some degree, suggest the idea that the Zinti territory was expanding. He may have done it subtly and quickly, but so I can feel comfortable saying that. So yeah, once he realizes that Taguda village had been taken, I think he realized it before. I think he realized it the moment he saw those markers, and he started seeing all these tracks leading up to all of these places that he was familiar with.
So in Zimwabi's mind, was there any possibility that his village was still intact and still part of, like, was still belonged to his people?
No, Zimwabi had always been confident that his people were gone.
Okay.
That he was the last, one of the last. I think it was episode 6, Confessions in the Jungle, when he went into his story. I think the very last thing that he said was he left them to the gods.
That's right.
It was, the jungle had closed in around them at that point after that last raid, and they just couldn't recover. They were all fighting amongst each other, and that's when Zimwabi just kind of left them in the rear view. So I think no matter what the reality it was, Zimwabi was convinced that that village was gone.
Yeah, so then we see these markers. What were the markers, by the way?
Description-wise, they were just all body parts, bones. Not so much as like body part, but they were bones, arms, legs, fingers.
Like hung up on something?
Yeah, like a cross. The cross was important for me because that indicated that it was more man-made for the most part, and all the bones hanging from it kind of gives ties to the cannibal and almost the undead. There's this transition happening.
Oh yeah, when you start seeing, like, when you just escape from a horde of undead, and you're seeing bones hanging from crosses. Yeah, you feel kind of form a relationship.
Yeah, you feel a connection somehow, and that's where I was going with it. There was this transition happening, even though it's not quite clear to you guys. It's still there, There's a presence there, and I think it set a certain tone just by them markers being there.
Right, and I remember, and even if the relationship's unknown, somebody even mentioned, I can't remember who, but somebody mentioned, like, well, maybe these things are wards to keep.
That's right.
The undead out.
Because you guys had made the connection that the undead weren't crossing the river, because there was other undead there too. There wasn't just the zombies, right? That weren't going into the water. They were kind of running alongside the river.
We just stayed away from them, so I didn't really. Yeah.
They had the black eyes and the black eye sockets. So yeah, you had those guys. That it could have been the water, or it could have been wards, but something was. You guys picked up on it. Somebody did.
Yeah, I'm still worried. Quincy is still worried about the return and having to travel that river again.
I would be too. It's a dangerous elbow right there. It's a dangerous elbow of a river.
But we see the signs, we see the markers, the bones hanging, and we know that we're in Zinti territory and that this is the place. We want to start looking for the subjects, the adventurers that we came to find. So we pull the canoes up to shore and we start exploring. We start following tracks, and we have different options. We have a cliff, we have a cave. We decide to try to go for the high ground to see what we could discover.
Yeah, it was a good move.
And we did see some things happening. From the ridge, though, we didn't have all the information, from the ridge. We sort of saw, well, remind me, what did we see up on the ridge?
I think what happened was...
Maybe the obelisk?
I think you guys went up there with intentions. And for whatever reason, they kind of got forgotten by everybody, by myself as well, It's one of those things where you went up there to get a lay of the land and kind of draw this is how I was picturing it anyways, draw out this kind of battle map. There's kind of strategy. But instead, what ended up happening is you went up, you caught a glimpse of, like, what's going on, but that's it. But that being said, you saw... It wasn't all too much activity down there. I tried to get that message across with the limited firelight. There wasn't all too much activity throughout the village. It was almost all concentrated in one section around this sort of construction site. couldn't really tell from a distance if it was a construction site, a dig site. Something was definitely being built for sure, but there's other things going on that could have also. Then you heard the drums.
We didn't hear the drums right away. We actually, while we're up there and trying to figure out how we're going to get closer, we find this hole. Is it like like basically to get into the cave?
Yeah, it had been a cave in, and that was a pretty high DC if I remember correctly too. I think it was like a 20.
But we did find it.
You did find it.
And we made our way into the cave. Copernicus actually falls when he's trying to go down, climb down. And Quincy tries to catch him because, he's a helpful young lad. And, of course, every fucking time Quincy tries to help somebody, Quincy, you fool.
Yeah.
He gets that every time. And, I've actually come up with a theory, like at least from Copernicus's, and why every time Quincy helps him, Copernicus calls Quincy a fool. I think it's because of his own, what's the name of his...
Sybil?
Sybil. It's because Sybil always calls Copernicus a fool. Yeah. So he's just sort of, continuing the cycle of abuse.
That's exactly what it is. I don't know how that happened, but that's how it's happening.
I think it's just happening spontaneously.
Right, but I couldn't tell if it's happening on my part or his part, because I know that he was the first person to do it. I know that he had called Quincy a fool. Yeah. And then it was when and because that was before the introduction to Sybil, and then after that, I had been doing the same to him. So whether I'm doing it subconsciously, kind of giving him a piece of what he's given everybody else,
right,
or if but it is happening that way, and that actually came to mind probably a couple weeks ago. How when I think about the relationship between Copernicus and Sybil, that's what I think about. I think about what type of person Copernicus is, and how much of that is directly contributed by his connection with Sybil. So.
Oh yeah. I think it's playing out pretty well.
The Sturges.
These Sturges, which are supposed to be, they're supposed to be pests. Like Zimwa B mentions that as children they clear out this cave. They're sent to clear out the caves of Sturges.
Yeah.
But yet at the same time, everybody else seems to do pretty good. Zavril's whipping them out of the air,
Oh yeah.
Arame's got fire bolts going on.
They were getting exploded as they should be.
Even Copernicus was doing something too. He had made a Sturge burst or something somehow.
Yeah.
I don't think Quincy did a damn thing. I don't think he had a single Sturge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with that fight, I think they had 2 or 3 hit points each.
Yeah, I remember you said 2 because somebody did 1 point of damage.
Yeah.
1 point.
You almost killed it. It's bloodied. It's a rare occurrence that Copernicus took as much bleed damage as he did from that thing, I mean, I think it rolled max damage on the bleed.
He looked beat up.
Yeah. They can be a pain if they're, and I think Zimwabi even says it, if the infestation gets too bad, that's when it becomes an issue with the Sturges, and which is why they always sent the kids up to clear them before they got bad.
Before they got to that point.
Yeah, you think about it, if there's 1 or 2 of them, they're not going to, you're going to be okay. There was how many were there? 6?
Oh, I can't remember.
I think there was 6 of them in that. That was also a random encounter.
Yeah, well, I just remember Quincy being pretty ineffective in that combat. But they were defeated, and we go through the caves, and there was a couple turns here and there. I think Quincy was marking our direction, even though it was a small system. It was a small cave system. He was marking which passages we were taking in case, and I kind of feel like this is strange for Quincy, or at least maybe even a turning point in case Zimwabi didn't make it. He wanted to be assured that we would know our way back through the caves.
Well, it's probably a good idea.
But do you think, and I've been wondering this myself, is it that he was just being cautious because he was fearful, or is he growing not jaded, but is he getting a little bit more, losing a little bit more of his
innocence?
Naive confidence that
Yeah,
everything's
I think it's
right.
been a gradual thing. I mean, Quincy from, I think, night 2 on the expedition has been 2 or 3, has been voicing his concerns about an exit strategy and just trying to make sure you guys have a way out before actually going in, So whether it's happening for one reason or another, it's definitely been a transition, I think.
Well, he definitely wants to live.
Yeah.
And he's not so bold and so confident that he just takes that for granted. But yeah, when we make our way through the caves, that's when we hear the drums. The drums start beating. And I like the post that James put in, the drum beats at the end of the episode.
Yep.
It's good.
Yep.
Nice touch.
And that's where, that's, I think that was the very end of
episode 9.
That episode, yeah.
Yeah, that's how episode 9 wraps up. And speaking of wrapping up, do you have anything else, any other topics you want to talk about regarding either episode 8 or episode 9?
Not so much. I was going to ask when, I wish Xavier was here because this would be more geared towards him, is what I was wondering when I was putting that together was if one of the boats got dragged down to the point where they were getting overwhelmed. I knew what Zim would be was going to do, because given that I had already made it clear Zim would be was absolutely terrified. He had never seen anything like that, and I don't think there was anything that could have happened to you guys that would have made him stay behind. But I wonder what Xavier would have done if you guys' boat got swarmed and theirs was free.
Safe.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think?
What do I think Xavier
would have done in that situation?
I'm not 100% certain. I'd like to think that he would have tried to help us.
Yeah.
And I think he would have tried to help us, but I'm not entirely convinced.
Yeah, I would have. Maybe next time we get together, that'll be the first question I can ask him. We can get it on. We can get it on record here.
You know what else too is if his boat went down, then our supplies would have been gone.
That's right.
Too, and it would have introduced an entirely new challenge.
Oh yeah.
To this expedition.
Yeah, I guess. It'd be. I wish the others could be here so I could ask. I'd like to get their input on that as well.
Yep, and we seem to have lost Christy Lee.
Yeah, she's tending to the critter.
Sounds like a wrap.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us. Make sure you email us if you have any questions. If you have any comments about the episodes, email us at Natty19 Podcast at gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.